Silent battlefields, where historic photos whisper the untold stories of war and human memory. Of course, the vast majority of deaths in World War II occurred on the battlefield or in concentration camps, but there were other ways to die as well. As the war began to draw to an inevitable end, and it became clear that the Allies would win, many German officials, such as Ernst Lissow, chose suicide rather than face almost certain execution by the Allies for their war crimes. With seemingly endless bombing campaigns reducing cities to rubble, those fortunate enough not to see combat live in constant fear of death. Pictured above are British schoolchildren taking part in an air raid drill. Neither the wooden desks nor the way they position their hands would offer much protection if hit by a German bomb. While most school children cowered under their desks during air raids, adults who were out during a terrorist attack often had to run to the nearest tube station to minimize their risk of death. Like these Londoners during a German air raid. While the tube offered a relatively high level of protection, those who took shelter there could still be confined to their new tube homes for days, with bombs occasionally penetrating shallower parts of the station. Due to the indiscriminate and sustained nature of much of the bombing during World War II, even those who tried their best to find shelter at the beginning of a raid often failed to act quickly enough. Such was the case with the passengers on this London bus. At the Battle of Midway, Japan's dominance in the Pacific was finally called into question. From June 3rd to 7th, 1942, just 6 months after Japan devastated the U.S. fleet at Pearl Harbor, the United States inflicted a decisive and devastating blow on Japan in the Pacific, destroying 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, a heavy cruiser, and 248 aircraft in the process. Some 3,057 Japanese soldiers died in the campaign, compared to just 307 Americans. While many soldiers in the war sought the glory of aerial combat rather than the harsh realities of ground combat, pilots were also forced to endure countless horrors in the skies. Mechanical failures leading to engine failure were not uncommon, and those lucky enough to avoid being shot down in a skirmish were also vulnerable to mid-air collisions, as was the case with this unfortunate pilot. In this iconic photograph, British prisoner of war Horace Greasley stares down one of the Nazi Party's leading figures, Heinrich Himmler. Here, Himmler is touring one of the many active German prisoner of war camps. He was the leader of the Nazis' notorious SS and the chief overseer of the concentration camps that systematically murdered millions of people. In the Allied effort to liberate the Pacific from Japanese control, an island-hopping strategy was employed, which saw the Allies systematically gain control of several key Japanese-held islands. One of these was Okinawa. Although the Allies ultimately won, the victory was difficult, and Japan's determination to fight to the end in this conflict was one of the reasons why the atomic bomb was ultimately deemed necessary. Although World War II caused countless forms of destruction, the devastation caused by the atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, dropped on Hiroshima on August 6, 1945, was the most catastrophic. United States officials debated whether to use the bomb. Ultimately, they justified its use on the grounds that it was a necessary evil, as well as the fact that if they did not drop such a devastating device, the Japanese would continue to fight to the last man, ultimately leading to more death and destruction. After the bomb was dropped, approximately 12.2 square kilometers, 4.7 square miles, of Hiroshima City were destroyed, with buildings reduced to irreparable rubble. The force of the explosion also immediately caused a series of fierce fires, quickly burning down any houses that were lucky enough to remain standing. Although World War I was technically the first major war fought in the Industrial Age, World War II brought with it a much more powerful array of weapons. These modern guns, tanks, and explosives were deafening to both the users and the recipients, and many soldiers suffered permanent hearing loss as a result. An American tank plows through the mud as the Ninth Army's attack on Germany begins. 1944. September 26, 1945. Japanese troops are surrounded by British forces in the Hong Kong shipyards. Under the command of Admiral Harcourt, a British task force recaptures the area after nearly 4 years of Japanese occupation. Around 1943, under a cloudy sky, a Royal Air Force RAF medium bomber glided silently, carrying its destructive power towards enemy territory. With its 2 powerful engines and its distinctive moss-colored camouflaged fuselage, it was both a symbol of British military technology and a testament to the dangerous missions its crew faced. The image of the lone bomber in the sky evoked both the heroism and tragedy of the fierce war. Circa 1945, against a backdrop of ruined buildings and rubble-strewn streets, a long column of defeated German soldiers trudged along with their hands on their heads. They had become prisoners of the U.S. Ninth Army after fierce fighting. Their faces, burned by the flames, showed exhaustion, frustration, and helplessness in the face of the inevitable collapse of the Third Reich. This scene clearly depicted the end of fascist expansionism. May 1945. Members of the Danish resistance movement escort 2 women arrested for their relations with the Nazis during the war. Circa 1943, German soldiers evacuate a house in Kharkov, destroyed by Russian artillery fire. Nurses, air raid prevention workers, and rescue workers tend to injured hospital patients, waiting on stretchers to be taken to nearby hospitals, after an air raid by a Nazi German Vergeltungswaffe Fiesler Fi-103 V1 Doodlebug bomber that hit Lewisham Hospital on the 26th of July, 1944, in London, England. On March 15, 1939, the heavy footsteps of the German army echoed through the cobblestone streets of Prague, the capital of Czechoslovakia. Long lines of soldiers in their distinctive gray uniforms and steel helmets marched in neat rows, rifles slung over their shoulders, into the city center, as the locals watched in bewilderment and helplessness. The invasion marked the end of Czechoslovak independence, as the small country was quickly swallowed up by the massive Nazi war machine. The image of the army marching into Prague became a haunting testament to Hitler's unstoppable expansion in the early years of World War II. In February 1942, in Singapore, Britain's impregnable citadel in the Far East, British, Australian, and Indian soldiers were forced to surrender to the Japanese army after days of fierce fighting. In their mud-stained uniforms, they silently bowed their heads before the enemy's guns. This event marked the most humiliating defeat in British military history, with more than 80,000 soldiers taken prisoner, and paved the way for Japan to control all of Southeast Asia at the height of World War II. In the final days of World War II, Hitler desperately relied on the fledgling youth force from the Hitler Youth, turning them into reluctant soldiers on the bloody battlefield. In the photo, he appears with a cold gaze, gently touching the face of a boy who had just been awarded a medal, as if to instill blind faith in them. These young faces, not yet 20 years old, were caught up in the vortex of propaganda, becoming human shields for a regime about to collapse. This is a tragic testament to the exploitation of youth in the frenzy of war. In the dimly lit train station, a sailor hurriedly gave his lover a passionate farewell kiss before the train rolled away. The girl stood on tiptoe, hugging him tightly through the train window, as if holding on to the last bit of warmth in the short moment. All around, silent eyes watched, filled with sympathy. The photo captured not only a farewell kiss, but also a symbol of love, sacrifice, and the pain of separation in war, where every encounter could be the last. The introduction of the American gas mask in combat. To protect troops from chemical attacks, the United States issued gas masks widely. Training ensured that soldiers could quickly put on masks when attacked. This protective device saved many lives in the mustard gas environment. Masks became an essential part of combat gear. Their use marked a new era in chemical warfare defense. Firefighters use a water hose to extinguish flames and damage on the flight deck of HMS Formidable, an illustrious class aircraft carrier of the Royal Navy, following a kamikaze air attack by an Imperial Japanese Navy Mitsubishi A6M0 during the Battle of Okinawa on the 4th of May, 1945, off the Sakishima Islands, Okinawa, Japan. Jacqueline Cochran, 1906 to 1980, a pioneering American pilot, is recognized as one of the greatest female racing pilots, setting numerous aviation records and becoming the first woman to break the sound barrier on May 18, 1953. During World War II, she served as a leader of the Women's Air Service Pilots, WASP. Before the U.S. entered the war, Cochran worked with the British Air Transport Auxiliary, ATA, transporting American aircraft to Britain. She was also the first woman to fly a Lockheed Hudson V bomber across the Atlantic. On June 1, 1941, at RAF Duxford, England, Cochran was photographed chatting with female members of the Royal Canadian Air Force, next to a Hawker Hurricane Mki-2B of 242 Squadron. In December 1942 in Detroit, Michigan, inside the Ford Motor Company's Willow Run B-24 Liberty plant, fuselages and wings for 4-engine consolidated B-24 Liberator heavy bombers were being rapidly assembled. This was one of the largest-scale aircraft production lines of its time, serving directly for the United States Army Air Force, USAAF. Willow Run was not only a symbol of American industrial might during World War II, but also demonstrated the ability to rapidly transition from automobile production to the manufacture of war equipment, contributing decisively to the Allies' air superiority. In 1940, a Jamaican RAF gunner was photographed sitting in the cockpit of an RAF aircraft. The image not only shows the focus and determination on the soldier's face, but also reflects the important role that pilots and gunners from across the colonies played in the fight against fascism. In the cramped space of the cockpit, he had to watch the sky, operate the machine gun, and be ready to respond to any threat, a testament to the courage and quiet contribution of those on the front lines. Around 1941, on the Eastern Front, German heavy tank units, working closely with infantry, launched a fierce attack on Soviet defensive positions. The battlefield was covered in billowing smoke. Steel tracks crushed the ground, while wave after wave of German soldiers poured forward under the cover of artillery and machine gun fire. This was the opening stage of the most fierce battle of World War II, where both sides unleashed their maximum strength in fierce battles, turning vast plains into seas of fire and fierce battlefields. Marta Lobelt, the operator, Gertrude Reinhold, Irene Haschke, and Anneliese Coleman, shortly after their arrest in Bergen-Belsen, May 2, 1945. The first three were dressed in Nazi uniforms, while Coleman wore an ill-fitting male uniform, because when she was arrested, she was wearing a prisoner's uniform to disguise herself as a Jewish woman. May 2, 1945. Before the outbreak of World War II, there were several international laws prohibiting the mistreatment of prisoners of war, POWs. However, these laws were often bent or completely ignored as the war continued. Here, Sikh prisoners awaited their untimely deaths at the hands of their Japanese captors. While all participating nations violated the rules to some extent regarding the treatment of POWs, most historians agree that the Japanese were the worst offenders. Even in history's darkest hours, there were glimmers of kindness and humanity. And though many prisoners and casualties of war were brutally treated or left for dead, some were given a rare second chance at the hands of the enemy. Such luck befell this newborn baby, carried to safety by an American soldier after the Battle of Saipan. Perhaps the most famous event of World War II, the Normandy landings, dubbed Operation Overlord and carried out by the Allies, was the largest amphibious assault in history, taking place on the northern coast of France on June 6, 1944. The landings, while ultimately successful, came at the cost of more than 209,000 Allied casualties. Many soldiers died before reaching the beaches. For much of the war, the Germans had absolute air dominance. The mighty and fearsome Luftwaffe, commanded by Hermann Göring, was the largest and most powerful air force in World War II. They had devastated London during the Battle of Britain. Here, however, the British got at least a small measure of revenge, bombing German-held Abbeville airfield in France. Terror came in all forms during World War II, and sometimes even being with your comrades was frightening. Here, a Russian soldier hopes that the ground around his trench will not be better occupied by a massive Russian T-34 tank during the Battle of Kursk, fought between German and Soviet forces in July and August 1943. War is hell. It can turn good, kind people into savage monsters, capable of untold destruction, torture, and inhumanity. Yet sometimes humanity wins out, as in the case of this German soldier who chose to give part of his rations to a starving Russian prisoner of war and her daughter. Although it looked as if Georges Blind, the man facing a barrage of German rifles in this photograph, was about to be executed, it was all a lie. The Germans were merely trying to extract information from Blind, a member of the French resistance. When Blind refused to reveal their intentions, the guns were lowered, and he was instead sent to a concentration camp, where he died almost immediately. A woman leans over the railing at a train station to kiss a British Expeditionary Force soldier returning from the front during World War II. June 13, 1942. Soviet bombers attack. May 31st, 1945. U.S. Marines of the 1st Division wait on a hilltop south of Okinawa as they watch phosphorus shells explode over the heads of Japanese soldiers entrenched on the hill. Circa 1940. An African-American war worker in a munitions factory.